Welcome to Anime Sleep Stories, where we explore the deepest corners of your favorite anime worlds. Tonight, we're embarking on a comprehensive journey through the shinobi world of Naruto, unraveling the complete story of the original series. From the ancient mythology that birthed chakra itself, to the formation of Team 7 and their first harrowing mission, this is the definitive chronicle of how a lonely boy, with a demon sealed inside him, began his path to becoming the greatest ninja in history. Get comfortable, let the rain, sounds of the hidden leaf wash over you, and let's begin where all shinobi legends must begin, with the very essence of their power. Long before the hidden villages existed, before the great shinobi clans carved their names into history, before even the concept of ninja arts as we know them took shape, there was only humanity living in a world devoid of the supernatural energy that would come to define their future. The story of chakra's origin is not merely a tale of power gained, but a cosmic event that fundamentally transformed the course of human civilization. Millennia before our story begins, something otherworldly arrived on Earth. A seed, carried across the vast emptiness of space, descended upon the planet and took root in its soil. This was no ordinary seed. It was the beginning of the God Tree, also called the Shinju, a cosmic entity that would draw sustenance not from sunlight and water alone, but from the very life force of the planet itself. The God Tree grew to immense proportions, its roots spreading deep into the earth, its branches reaching toward the heavens, and its presence became woven into the landscape itself. The people of this ancient era knew nothing of chakra. They lived, fought, and died as ordinary humans. Their conflicts settled through physical strength, cunning, and the weapons they could forge with their hands. Wars were brutal affairs of steel and blood, where victory belonged to the strong and defeat meant oblivion for entire bloodlines. But the God Tree observed, patient and alien, growing ever larger as it absorbed energy from the world around it. Once every 1,000 years, so the legends tell, the God Tree would produce a single fruit. This chakra fruit contained within it all the energy the tree had accumulated, concentrated into a physical form of unimaginable power. It was said that the land around the God Tree flourished because of its presence, but the truth was far more sinister. The tree was feeding, drawing life from everything around it, preparing to create something that would fundamentally alter reality itself. Then came Kaguya Otsutsuki. She was not of this world. A member of the Otsutsuki clan, beings who traveled between planets harvesting chakra fruits to increase their own godlike power, Kaguya arrived on Earth with a purpose. But something changed in her. Perhaps it was the beauty of the world, or perhaps it was something more complex. But Kaguya made a decision that would echo through the ages. She consumed the chakra fruit herself. The moment the fruit touched her lips, existence itself seemed to shift. Power beyond mortal comprehension flooded into Kaguya's being. She became something more than human, more than Otsutsuki. She became the progenitor of chakra on Earth, the sole possessor of a power that made her effectively omnipotent. With this newfound ability, Kaguya brought an end to the wars that had plagued humanity. No army could stand against her. No weapon could harm her. She became revered as a goddess, the rabbit goddess, and for a time there was peace. But absolute power, as the saying goes, corrupts absolutely. Kaguya's rule became increasingly tyrannical. She demanded worship, obedience, and eventually something far more sinister. The methods she employed to maintain her dominance grew darker, and the people who had once revered her began to fear her. Yet none could challenge a goddess. Kaguya's story took a turn when she gave birth to twin sons, Hamura and Hagoromo. These children, were the first beings born with chakra flowing naturally through their bodies, inheriting a portion of their mother's impossible power. As they grew, they witnessed their mother's transformation into something monstrous. Kaguya, desperate to reclaim all of her power and fearing future threats, merged with the god tree itself, becoming the original Ten Tails, a creature of pure destruction and incomprehensible strength. The Ten Tails ravaged the land, but Hamura and Hagoromo stood against their own mother. In a battle that lasted months, the two brothers fought the demon their mother had become. The earth shattered beneath their conflict, mountains crumbled, rivers dried. The very landscape was rewritten by their clash. Finally, through their combined strength and the sealing techniques they had developed, they managed to seal the Ten Tails. Hagoromo took the beast into himself, becoming the first Jinchuriki in history, a human host containing a tailed beast within their body. With the Ten Tails sealed, Hagoromo became known as the Sage of Six Paths. He was, in essence, the first true shinobi, though what that word meant to him was vastly different from what it would come to mean. Hagoromo looked upon the war-torn world and made a decision that would shape the next 1,000 years of history. He would share chakra with humanity. But Hagoromo's vision was pure. He called his teaching ninshu, a practice centered on using chakra to connect people's spiritual energies. His philosophy was revolutionary and beautiful in its simplicity. If people could truly understand one another, if they could feel each other's pain and joy through connected spiritual energy, then conflicts would dissolve, hatred would fade, war would become unnecessary. Chakra was meant to be a bridge between souls, a way to achieve true empathy and lasting peace. Hagoromo traveled the world, sharing his gift freely. He taught people how to mold their physical and spiritual energies together, how to channel chakra through their bodies, how to use this power for creation and connection. Disciples gathered around him, learning his techniques and philosophy. The Sage of Six Paths divided the Ten Tails chakra into 9 separate entities, the tailed beasts, giving each a name and identity. Rather than leaving them as mindless weapons, he saw them as beings deserving of respect and understanding. Before his death, Hagoromo had 2 sons of his own, Indra and Asura. Indra inherited his father's powerful chakra and eyes, becoming the progenitor of the Uchiha clan. Asura inherited his father's body and indomitable will, becoming the progenitor of the Senju clan. But even in his own family, Hagoromo's dream of peace through understanding was tested. The brothers' rivalry would echo through their descendants for generations, a cycle of conflict between Uchiha and Senju that would define the shinobi world's bloodiest era. After Hagoromo's death, humanity twisted his teachings. Rather than using chakra to connect with others, they discovered it could be weaponized. The first person to mold chakra into a destructive technique, to turn spiritual energy into a fireball or a blade of wind, forever changed what it meant to wield this power. Ninshu became ninjutsu. Connection became combat. Understanding became annihilation. Chakra itself is a fascinating and complex energy system. It exists as a combination of physical energy drawn from the trillions of cells that make up a person's body, and spiritual energy accumulated through experience, training, and consciousness. When these 2 energies are mixed together inside a person, chakra is formed. Every individual's chakra has a unique signature, a specific feeling and presence that trained senses can detect and identify, much like a fingerprint. The human body contains a chakra pathway system, similar to the cardiovascular system, with chakra flowing through channels to specific release points called tenketsu. There are exactly 361 of these nodes in the human body. When a shinobi performs a technique, They're drawing chakra from their reserves, channeling it through these pathways, and releasing it through their tenketsu, often while using hand seals to help shape and control the energy. Chakra can be transformed into one of 5 basic nature types: fire, wind, lightning, earth, and water. Each person typically has an affinity for 1 or 2 of these elements, determined by their genetics and physical makeup. Beyond the basic 5, there exist yin release and yang release, dealing with imagination and life force, respectively. When 2 or more nature types are combined simultaneously, a Kekkei Genkai, or bloodline limit, can be created, producing abilities like ice, wood, or lava. The amount of chakra a person possesses is largely determined by their genetics and lineage. Training can increase one's reserves and improve control, but there are inherent limits. Someone born to a clan with naturally large chakra reserves, like the Uzumaki, will always have an advantage in raw power over someone with average genetics, no matter how much the latter trains. This genetic lottery created a natural hierarchy in the shinobi world. But raw chakra reserves mean nothing without control. The key to becoming a truly powerful ninja isn't necessarily having the most chakra, but rather knowing how to use it efficiently. Molding too much chakra for a technique wastes energy and exhausts the user. Molding too little results in a failed technique or a weakened effect. The best shinobi can mold exactly the amount they need, no more and no less, allowing them to fight longer and perform more techniques. This is why medical ninja and genjutsu specialists, who require extremely precise chakra control, are so highly valued despite often having average chakra reserves. The spiritual component of chakra means that a ninja's emotional and mental state directly affects their ability to use it effectively. Remaining calm and focused allows for better chakra control. Rage, fear, and desperation can cause chakra to become wild and difficult to manage, though in some cases, strong emotions can actually amplify a technique's power at the cost of control and efficiency. Shape transformation and nature transformation are the 2 fundamental methods of manipulating chakra. Shape transformation determines the form, movement, size, and range of a technique. A simple fireball versus a stream of fire versus an explosive fire sphere. All use the same fire nature, but different shape transformations. Nature transformation alters the inherent properties of chakra, giving it elemental characteristics. Mastering both opens up nearly unlimited possibilities for creating and adapting techniques. And so, from Kaguya's theft of divine fruit, to Hagoromo's dreams of connection to humanity's weaponization of power, chakra became the defining element of the shinobi world. It divided people into those who could wield it and those who could not. It created clans with special abilities passed through bloodlines. It made children into weapons and peace into a distant dream. This is the foundation upon which everything else was built. The wars that followed, the villages that rose, the hatred that festered, and yes, even the hope that somehow someone might finally fulfill Hagoromo's original vision of true understanding between people. All of it stems from that ancient moment when Kaguya consumed the chakra fruit and changed the world forever. The world of Naruto is dominated by 5 superpowers known as the 5 great shinobi nations. These massive countries, each led by a feudal lord called a daimyo, control the majority of the land, resources, and political power in the known world. Each nation is named after the dominant chakra nature found in its territory, a reflection of how deeply the very landscape has been shaped by chakra itself. At the center of the continent lies the land of fire, home to Konoha, the village hidden in the leaves. The land of fire enjoys warm weather, abundant natural resources, and fertile land that made it prosperous and populous. Its central location made it both a target and a buffer between the other nations. The Land of Fire's daimyo resided in the fire capital, maintaining political authority, while the Hokage of Konoha commanded the military might that protected the nation's interests. To the northeast sprawls the Land of Lightning, a mountainous country where storms rage across peaks that pierce the clouds. Kumogakure, the village hidden in the clouds, was built among these mountains, its ninja known for their lightning-based techniques and physical prowess. The Land of Lightning's warriors developed a reputation for being aggressive and ambitious, constantly seeking to expand their power and acquire the techniques of other villages through any means necessary. The northwest belonged to the Land of Earth, a rocky realm of canyons, stone forests, and underground caverns. Iwagakure, the village hidden in the stones, produced ninja famous for their earth-based jutsu and their stubborn, unyielding personalities. The third Tsuchikage would later describe his people as having attitudes as hard as the rock they manipulated, unwilling to give up once they'd committed to a course of action. In the southwest stretched the Land of Wind, dominated by vast deserts where sandstorms could erase entire caravans in minutes. Sunagakure, the village hidden in the sand, struggled with harsh conditions that made life difficult, even as they provided excellent defensive advantages. The ninja of Suna specialized in wind techniques and puppet arts, developing fighting styles adapted to their brutal environment. Finally, the east was claimed by the Land of Water, an island nation separated from the mainland continent. Kirigakure, the village hidden in the mist, was shrouded in perpetual fog. The isolation of the Land of Water allowed it to develop independently, creating some of the most brutal shinobi training methods in the world. For many years, Kirigakure forced its academy students to fight to the death against their classmates as a graduation requirement, believing only the strong and ruthless deserved to become ninja. These 5 nations, for all their power and resources, were locked in a cycle of perpetual conflict. Smaller nations existed between them, buffer states like the Land of Rivers, the Land of Rain, and the Land of Grass. But these minor powers were often little more than battlegrounds where the great nations fought their proxy wars, destroying everything in pursuit of advantage. Before the hidden village system was established, the world was in what historians call the Warring States period. This was an era of unending bloodshed where shinobi clans hired themselves out to whoever would pay them. Loyalty lasted only as long as the contract, and today's employer might become tomorrow's enemy. Children were sent to battlefields as soon as they could hold a kunai, their lives expendable resources in the endless struggle for survival. Clans fought clans in vendettas that stretched back generations. A senju killed an uchiha, so the uchiha killed 2 senju, so the senju killed 4 uchiha, and the spiral continued downward into madness. There was no childhood in such times, no innocence preserved. A 5-year-old who couldn't fight was a 5-year-old who would die when enemies attacked brothers, watch sisters die. Children stepped over their parents' bodies. The earth itself seemed soaked in blood that would never wash away. Power was everything in the Warring States period. A clan with powerful bloodline abilities could dominate an entire region, taking the best contracts and growing wealthy and influential clans without special abilities struggled to survive, often being annihilated or absorbed by stronger rivals. Marriage alliances were tools of power, children born to combine bloodlines and create even stronger warriors. Love was a luxury few could afford. It was into this world of ash and sorrow that Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha were born, two boys from enemy clans who would dare to dream of something different. Their story is where the hidden village system truly begins, where the cycle of hatred first showed signs of potentially breaking. Picture a river flowing through a war-torn land. On its banks, two boys skip stones across the water's surface, competing to see whose stone can bounce the most times before sinking. They laugh. They talk about their dreams and frustrations. They find in each other something they'd never known before, a true friend who understands them completely. These boys don't know each other's family names. They don't know that their fathers lead the two most powerful and hated clans in the Land of Fire. They don't know that they're supposed to be mortal enemies. They only know that in this moment, beside this river, they've found something precious. Hashirama Senju was the eldest son of Butsuma Senju, head of the Senju clan. From birth, he was groomed to be a warrior, trained to kill and trained to lead. By the time he was 7 years old, Hashirama had already seen two of his brothers die on the battlefield. Itama and Kawarama, both younger than him, both full of potential and life, both cut down by Uchiha blades. Their deaths haunted Hashirama, planting in his mind a question that seemed almost heretical in that blood-soaked age. Did it have to be this way? Madara Uchiha was born into equal pain. The Uchiha clan, famous for their Sharingan bloodline limit, suffered losses just as terrible as the Senju Madara had 4 brothers when he was young. One by one, he watched them march off to war. One by one, he attended their funerals or searched for bodies that would never be found. By the time he was 8, only one brother remained, Izuna, the person Madara loved most in all the world. When Hashirama and Madara met by that river, neither spoke their family names. Perhaps instinctively they knew that such knowledge would end this rare peace. They spoke instead of dreams. Hashirama told Madara about his vision of a village where children didn't have to fight, where they could grow up safe and only become warriors once they were ready. Madara shared his own desire for a world where his brother would never have to die on some nameless battlefield. They met again and again at that river, their friendship growing stronger with each encounter. They trained together, pushing each other to become more powerful. Hashirama discovered he could manipulate wood, a rare and powerful ability that combined earth and water, nature transformations. Madara awakened his Sharingan at a young age, the Uchiha's legendary dojutsu that could copy techniques and see through deception. But friendship cannot exist in a vacuum, especially in time of war. Eventually, their families grew suspicious. Following his son one day, Butsuma Senju discovered Hashirama's secret meetings with Madara. At the same time, Tajima Uchiha learned of his son's friendship with an enemy. The next time Hashirama and Madara met by the river, their fathers and brothers were there, ready to kill. The two boys stood between their families, neither willing to betray the other despite knowing they should. Hashirama and Madara were forced to fight, to maintain the pretense of enmity, but neither could bring themselves to strike a killing blow. Their families eventually retreated, but the friendship was exposed. The boys were forbidden from meeting again. Duty to clan and family demanded they treat each other as enemies. Years passed. The war continued. Both Hashirama and Madara became increasingly powerful, each earning fearsome reputations on the battlefield. Hashirama's wood release made him nearly invincible, able to create forests in moments and subdue even the most powerful opponents. Madara's Sharingan evolved into the Mangekyu Sharingan after witnessing enough death, granting him abilities that made entire enemy armies flee in terror. Then came the day that broke Madara forever. In a major battle between the Senju and Uchiha, Madara's last remaining brother, Izuna, was fatally wounded by Tobirama Senju. Hashirama's younger brother Izuna died in Madara's arms, but before passing, he gave Madara his own eyes, allowing Madara to obtain the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, a power that didn't degrade with use. The guilt and rage of failing to protect his last brother consumed Madara, turning something in him dark and cold. After Izuna's death, Madara led the Uchiha in one final assault against the Senju, determined to end this conflict one way or another. The battle was catastrophic. The earth itself cracked under the force of their techniques. When the dust settled, Madara lay defeated, exhausted, his clan decimated. Tobirama prepared to execute Madara, to finally end the Uchiha threat once and for all. But Hashirama stopped him. Despite everything, despite all the death and pain, despite knowing that Madara would never forgive Tobirama for Izuna's death, Hashirama stood between his brother and his former friend. He made an offer that shocked everyone present. He offered to kill himself if it would bring peace between the clans. Hashirama raised a kunai to his own throat, fully prepared to die if it meant ending the cycle of hatred. In that moment, Madara saw the same boy he'd met by the river so many years ago, the boy who had dreamed of a village where brothers didn't have to die. Something in Madara's heart cracked. He stopped Hashirama, accepting the offered peace. The Senju and Uchiha clans formed an alliance, the first time such a thing had happened in living memory. Other clans that had been allied with either the Senju or Uchiha soon joined, until a coalition of clans stood together. They claimed a forested land rich with resources and began construction of the first hidden village. Madara named it Konoha, the village hidden in the leaves. It was to be a place where children could grow up safe, where they wouldn't see war until they were old enough and trained enough to survive it. The village would take missions from the Land of Fire's daimyo, providing protection and military service in exchange for funding and legitimacy. Other villages, inspired by this model, would form their own hidden villages, and the warring states period would end. It was a dream made real, carved out of hatred and blood, and the impossible friendship of two boys who had once skipped stones beside a river. For a brief, shining moment, it seemed like everything might actually work. The trouble began, as it so often does, with politics and the question of power. With Konoha established, the village needed a leader, someone who would guide it and make the crucial decisions that would determine its future. Hashirama believed Madara should become the first Hokage. It made sense to him. Madara was brilliant, powerful, and had been instrumental in making the village a reality. More than that, Hashirama wanted Madara to receive the recognition and respect he deserved, to be seen as a hero rather than a former enemy. But Hashirama's younger brother, Tobirama, disagreed vehemently. Tobirama had never trusted the Uchiha, and he especially didn't trust Madara. He argued that the village would never accept an Uchiha as their leader so soon after the clans had been at war. He insisted that the Hokage should be chosen democratically by the village's ninja, not appointed. Hashirama, who had never particularly wanted power for himself, reluctantly agreed to let the village decide. When votes were counted, Hashirama was chosen as the first Hokage. The people trusted him, loved him, saw him as the god of shinobi who had made the village possible. Madara had been necessary, yes, but he was also frightening, unpredictable, and too many villagers remembered fighting against him. Madara accepted the decision outwardly, but something festered in his heart. He'd given up everything for this village. He'd set aside his vengeance for Izuna. He'd worked alongside his brother's killers. And still, he was seen as lesser, as someone to be watched with suspicion rather than celebrated as a founder. Hashirama offered Madara the position of his right hand, his most trusted advisor, working to improve Madara's standing in the village, so that perhaps someday he could become the second Hokage. But Madara believed the position would inevitably go to Tobirama, Hashirama's own brother. He felt trapped in a village that would never truly accept him or his clan. Beneath the Uchiha clan compound sat an ancient stone tablet, passed down through generations. Only those with the Sharingan could read it, and the more advanced one's eyes, the more of the tablet's secrets were revealed. Madara, with his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, could read deeper into the tablet than any Uchiha before him. What he found there changed him. The tablet spoke of infinite power, of the infinite Tsukuyomi, of a way to create a perfect world where no one would ever have to suffer again. Whether Madara understood that the tablet had been altered by Black Zetsu, a manifestation of Kaguya's will, is unclear. What is certain is that the tablet's words gave Madara justification for what he was already beginning to believe, that peace through mutual understanding was impossible, that the only way to end suffering was to end reality as they knew it. Madara tried to rally the Uchiha clan to his cause, to convince them that Konoha was a cage that would eventually destroy them. But the Uchiha had finally found peace. They had homes, families, prosperity. They refused to follow Madara into rebellion against the village they'd helped build. Betrayed by his own clan, Madara left Konoha as a rogue ninja, abandoning the dream he'd once shared with Hashirama. The village prospered without him. Other nations, seeing the success of Konoha, created their own hidden villages. Sunagakure, Iwagakure, Kumogakure, and Kirigakure were established, each becoming the military might of their respective nations. The hidden village system promised stability and an end to the constant warfare of the warring states period. For the first time in generations, children could hope to reach adulthood. But Madara was not finished with Konoha. Years after his departure, Madara returned. He'd somehow gained control of the nine-tailed fox, Kurama, the most powerful of all the tailed beasts. With the demon fox under his command, Madara launched an assault on Konoha. Kurama's power was incomprehensible. Each swipe of its tails enough to flatten mountains, its chakra reserves seemingly endless. The village that Madara had helped create now faced annihilation by his hand. Hashirama was forced to confront his former friend in battle. It was a conflict that would be remembered for generations, so destructive that the very landscape was permanently altered by their clash. The battle raged at a location that would come to be known as the Valley of the End, where two massive waterfalls cascade down a cliff face. Madara stood atop Kurama, the demon fox's chakra surrounding him like armor. His Susanoo, a massive chakra construct that acted as the ultimate defense and offense. Overlaying the beast, Hashirama summoned his most powerful technique, the Sage Art. True, several thousand hands, a gargantuan wooden statue with thousands of arms, each one capable of striking with devastating force. The scale of the battle was beyond human comprehension. Mountains crumbled, rivers changed course. The very earth shattered under the pressure of their techniques. Kurama's tailed beast bombs carved canyons into the landscape. Hashirama's wood constructs created forests that still stand to this day. The sky itself seemed to crack under the strain of their chakra. In the end, Hashirama emerged victorious. He managed to separate Kurama from Madara's control and defeat his former friend. Madara fell, apparently dead, his blood staining the stones of the newly formed valley. Hashirama had no choice but to seal Kurama away, and his wife, Mito Uzumaki, volunteered to become the beast's Jinchuriki, the first person to willingly take on such a burden to protect the village. The battle's conclusion was carved into the cliff face of the Valley of the End. Two massive statues were erected, facing each other across the waterfall. One of Hashirama, hands formed in his signature seal, and one of Madara, Sharingan eyes, staring eternally at his rival. It was meant to commemorate the battle and serve as a reminder of the bonds that existed even between enemies. But Madara had not actually died. Using a technique called Izanagi, he'd rewritten reality itself for just a moment, making his death an illusion, while the real Madara escaped with a piece of Hashirama's flesh. In the darkness of hidden caves, Madara survived, sustained by the very wood-release cells he'd stolen from his former friend. He waited, planned, and eventually found a successor to carry out his vision. Hashirama lived for some years after the battle, long enough to see his granddaughter Tsunade born, long enough to distribute the tailed beast to the other hidden villages as peace offerings meant to balance power. He died in one of the many conflicts that followed the establishment of the villages, passing the title of Hokage to his brother, Tobirama, his will of fire, the philosophy that the entire village was one family and that a Hokage must be willing to sacrifice everything for that family, became the cornerstone of Konoha's identity. The impact of Hashirama and Madara's relationship echoed through the decades. The Uchiha clan, despite being founders of Konoha, were increasingly marginalized and suspected, especially under Tobirama's administration. Madara's betrayal had tainted them in the eyes of many. This suspicion would fester, growing like a cancer in the heart of the village, until it would eventually lead to tragedy. But more than that, the conflict between these two legendary shinobi set a template that would repeat through generations. The cycle of understanding turning to hatred, of friendship breaking under the weight of different philosophies, of those who sought change through connection versus those who sought it through control. This cycle would continue, finding new participants, until perhaps someone could finally break it for good. That someone, though no one knew it yet, would be a blonde-haired boy with blue eyes and whisker marks on his cheeks. A boy who hadn't even been born yet, but whose destiny was already being written in the stars. The Nine-Tails attack, the night everything changed. October 10th. In the years following that date, it would be marked as a day of both tragedy and celebration in Konoha, though for very different reasons. On that cool autumn night, the village that Hashirama and Madara had founded decades earlier faced its greatest crisis since the battle at the Valley of the End. It was the night when the nine-tailed fox attacked, and it was the night Naruto Uzumaki was born. To understand what happened, we must first understand the circumstances that made it possible. The Nine-Tails, Kurama, had been sealed inside Mito Uzumaki after Hashirama's final battle with Madara. When Mito grew old and knew her death was approaching, the seal was transferred to a new host, Kushina Uzumaki, a young woman from the land of whirlpools who had come to Konoha specifically for this purpose. The Uzumaki clan possessed certain unique characteristics that made them ideal Jinchuriki. Their life force was extraordinarily strong, granting them massive chakra reserves, longevity, and impressive vitality. This meant they could survive the extraction of a tailed beast longer than others, and their bodies could withstand the strain of containing such immense power. Kushina, despite her fears and struggles, served as Kurama's host for years, becoming a skilled kunoichi and eventually falling in love with a young man named Minato Namikaze. Minato was brilliant, powerful, and kind. He'd studied under Jiraiya, one of the legendary Sannin, and developed the Flying Thunder God technique to a level of mastery that exceeded even its creator. The second Hokage Tobirama, Minato's speed in battle, earned him the title Yellow Flash of the Leaf, and entire enemy armies were ordered to flee on sight if they encountered him. He was everything a Hokage should be: strong, wise, and devoted to protecting his village. When Kushina became pregnant with their child, both she and Minato were overjoyed. But pregnancy presented a unique danger for a female Jinchuriki. The seal that contained the tailed beast weakened during childbirth, as the mother's body redirected energy to sustain both herself and her baby. The seal could potentially break entirely during delivery, releasing the beast. Knowing this, elaborate precautions were taken. Kushina's pregnancy was kept secret from the general population. The delivery would take place in a secret location far from the village, protected by barriers and guarded by ANBU operatives. Biwako and Taji, two experienced midwives, would assist. The third Hokage's wife would be present, and Minato himself would be there to reinforce the seal immediately after the birth. Every possible precaution was taken to ensure nothing could go wrong. They didn't account for Obito Uchiha. Obito had once been Minato's student, a member of Team Minato alongside Kakashi Hatake and Rin Nohara. He'd been presumed dead years earlier, crushed under a boulder during the Third Shinobi War. But Obito had survived, rescued by an aged Madara Uchiha who'd manipulated the boy's trauma and grief, filling his heart with hatred for a world that had taken everything from him. By the time of Kushina's pregnancy, Obito had become a shadow of his former self, wearing a mask and calling himself Tobi, devoted to bringing about Madara's plan for the infinite Tsukuyomi. Obito learned of Kushina's pregnancy by chance, overhearing Kakashi speak about it at Rin's grave in the Konoha cemetery. It was the opening he needed. If he could take control of the Nine Tails at its weakest moment, he could strike a devastating blow against Konoha and acquire a weapon powerful enough to further Madara's plans. On October 10th, Kushina gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Naruto, after a character in Jiraiya's novel, making the legendary Sannin the child's godfather. For a brief moment, joy overwhelmed all other concerns. Minato held his newborn son, and Kushina cried with happiness despite her exhaustion. They were a family. Then Obito struck. Using the Sharingan's ability to phase through solid matter, Obito penetrated the barriers protecting the birthing location. He killed the Ambu guards outside silently, leaving no one to raise an alarm. He entered the cave to find Biwako holding the newborn Naruto, while Taji tended to Kushina. Without hesitation, Obito killed both midwives in an instant, their blood spattering across the cave walls. Obito grabbed Naruto, placing explosive tags on the infant and holding him hostage. He commanded Minato to step away from Kushina, away from the seal that was keeping the Nine Tails contained. Minato had no choice but to comply. He used the flying thunder god to teleport away with Naruto, removing the explosive tags and getting his son to safety in one of his prepared safe houses. But those crucial seconds were all Obito needed. He approached the weakened Kushina and forcibly extracted the Nine Tails from her body. The Uzumaki vitality that made Kushina an ideal host now became her curse, as she survived the extraction, but in terrible agony. Obito used his Sharingan to take control of Kurama's mind, enslaving the tailed beast to his will. Kurama was no simple monster. The fox possessed intelligence, feelings, and decades of resentment toward humans who had treated it as a weapon to be used and sealed away. Under Obito's control, that rage was given focus and form. Obito summoned the Nine Tails directly into the middle of Konoha, ordering it to destroy everything. Imagine the terror, the hidden leaf village, peaceful in the night, suddenly erupting in chaos as a demon the size of a mountain materialized in its streets. Kurama's Nine Tails lashed out, each one capable of destroying city blocks. Buildings centuries old crumbled to dust. Ninja who'd survived countless battles were crushed like insects. The beast's chakra was so intense, it felt like reality itself was warping. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, who had retired and passed the title to Minato, leapt back into action despite his age. The Ino Shika Cho formations, specialized three-man teams from the Yamanaka, Nara, and Akimichi clans, deployed to try to slow the beast. Every able-bodied ninja in the village rushed to defend their home. But what could they do against something like this? Kurama gathered chakra for a tailed beast ball, a concentrated sphere of destructive energy that could obliterate everything in its path. The blast was aimed directly at the Hokage Rock, the monument carved with the faces of all the village's leaders. If it hit, the explosion would take out a huge portion of the village, killing thousands. Minato appeared in a flash of yellow, using his flying thunder god, guiding thunder technique to redirect the tailed beast ball away from the village. The explosion detonated harmlessly in the distant mountains, carving a new valley into the landscape. He'd saved countless lives, but the Ninetales was still rampaging, and Obito was still controlling it. Minato engaged Obito directly, the student facing his corrupted mentor. Their battle was brief but intense. Obito used his Kamui ability to become intangible, passing through Minato's attacks while trying to grab him and teleport him to another dimension. But Minato's tactical genius and his marking of Obito with a flying thunder god seal allowed him to land a devastating Rasengan, forcing Obito to break his concentration. The Rasengan, a technique Minato had created himself, was a spinning sphere of pure chakra that didn't require hand seals. It ripped apart Obito's arm and forced him to flee, but more importantly, it disrupted his control over the Ninetales freed from the Sharingan's influence. Kurama's mind was its own again, but that didn't make the fox less dangerous. If anything, it made things worse. Now the demon attacked of its own free will, venting centuries of rage at being sealed, controlled, and used as a weapon. Minato summoned Gamabunta, the gigantic toad boss of Mount Myoboku, and teleported both the toad and the Ninetales to the location where he'd left Kushina and baby Naruto. It was the farthest point from the village he could reach, buying time, but knowing he had only moments to act. Kushina, despite being on the verge of death from the extraction, used the last of her strength to manifest chakra chains, a special ability of the Uzumaki clan, to bind the Ninetales and hold it still. She offered to have the Ninetales sealed back into her body. She would die anyway from the extraction, but if she took Kurama with her, the beast would die too, at least for a time, until it reformed years later. But Minato refused. He'd fought Obito, seen the Sharingan technique that could control tailed beasts. He understood that Obito would return someday to try again, and when he did, the village would need Kurama's power to fight him. More than that, Minato had faith. Faith in his son. Faith that Naruto could someday master the Ninetales' power and use it to protect people. Minato was willing to bet everything on that faith, on the belief that his son would grow up to be a hero. Minato made his decision. He would use the dead demon consuming seal, a forbidden technique created by the Uzumaki clan that summoned the Shinigami, the death god itself, to seal something at the cost of the user's soul. But Minato modified the technique. Instead of sealing all of Kurama, he would split the beast's chakra in half. He sealed the yin half of Kurama's chakra within himself, taking it to his grave. The yang half he would seal within Naruto, using the 8 trigrams, sealing style. Kushina wept, knowing she would never see her son grow up, never be there for his first steps, or first day at the academy, or first heartbreak. Minato comforted her, even as the Shinigami's spectral arm reached through his body, even as death claimed him. they both imparted a portion of their own chakra into the seal, a final gift to their son, so that someday he might meet them, even if only as echoes of who they'd been. In their final moments, Kushina and Minato spoke to Naruto. They told him not to be a picky eater, to take baths every day, to make friends and treasure them. They apologized for not being able to be there for him. They told him they loved him more than anything in the world, and they died, leaving their newborn son alone on a blood-stained cave floor, the Nine Tails now sealed within his tiny body. Hiruzen arrived too late to stop the sealing, but in time to hear Minato's final request, that the village see Naruto as a hero who helped defeat the Nine Tails, not as the demon itself. With Kushina and Minato dead, Hiruzen brought Naruto back to the village. He decided to keep Naruto's heritage secret, fearing that Minato's enemies from other villages might try to assassinate the son of the Yellow Flash. Naruto would be given his mother's maiden name, Uzumaki. The aftermath of the Nine Tails attack was devastating. Entire districts of Konoha were reduced to rubble. The death toll was in the hundreds, maybe thousands. Countless children were left orphaned. The fourth Hokage, who had led the village for only a short time, was dead along with his wife. The creature that had destroyed so much was now sealed inside a newborn baby. Hiruzen, despite having retired, took up the mantle of Hokage once more out of necessity. He stood before the survivors and relayed Minato's dying wish, that Naruto be seen as a hero, not a monster. Some people, able to separate the seal from what was sealed, honored this request. Most could not. They looked at the baby with the whisker marks on his cheeks and saw only the demon fox that had killed their loved ones, destroyed their homes, and left their village in ruins. The third Hokage, trying to prevent hatred from poisoning the next generation, decreed that no one was allowed to speak of Naruto being the Nine Tails Jinchuriki. It was to be an S-rank secret, punishable by severe consequences if revealed. He hoped this would allow Naruto to grow up without being defined by the beast inside him. But silence about the why did nothing to stop the how. The adults couldn't speak of Naruto being a Jinchuriki, but that didn't stop them from glaring at him with barely concealed hatred. It didn't stop them from refusing to serve him in shops or charging him outrageous prices. It didn't stop them from telling their children to stay away from that boy, and the children, not understanding why but following their parents' example, ostracized Naruto from the earliest days of his life. October 10th became a day of mourning in Konoha, a day to remember those who died defending the village. Memorials were held, names were read aloud, tears were shed, and through it all, a small boy with blonde hair and blue eyes sat alone in his apartment, knowing only that everyone seemed to hate him, but not understanding why. This was the legacy of Obito's attack. Not just the physical destruction or the political instability that followed, but the creation of a child who would grow up hated for circumstances beyond his control. A boy who would have to fight for every scrap of acknowledgement and love. A Jinchuriki who was supposed to be seen as a hero, but was instead treated as the very demon his parents died to seal away. The Nine Tails attack shaped Konoha's future in ways both obvious and subtle. It set in motion events that would determine the fate of the entire shinobi world. And at the center of it all was Naruto Uzumaki, a baby who would grow into a boy who would grow into a ninja, and a ninja who would someday challenge the very cycle of hatred that had claimed his parents' lives. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who pretend you don't exist, and Naruto Uzumaki knew that loneliness intimately. From his earliest memories, he understood that he was different, that something about him made people uncomfortable, angry, hateful. He just didn't understand what or why. Naruto grew up in a small apartment on the outskirts of the village, isolated even in its physical location. The third Hokage provided him with a monthly allowance for food and basic necessities, but Naruto essentially raised himself. There was no one to teach him how to cook, so he survived on instant ramen from the Ichiraku stand, one of the few places that would serve him without contempt. There was no one to help him with homework or tuck him into bed or tell him stories. He learned to do laundry by trial and error, shrinking his clothes in hot water before figuring out the right temperature. The village's treatment of Naruto was insidious in its cruelty. Adults would pull their children away when he approached, whispering warnings to stay away from that boy. Shopkeepers would refuse him service entirely, or if forced to serve him, would charge him inflated prices for expired or defective goods. He would find his apartment vandalized, trash thrown through his windows, obscenities painted on his door, and no one ever faced consequences for any of it. Naruto couldn't understand what he'd done to deserve such treatment. He was just a kid. He tried to be good, tried to follow the rules, tried to make people like him. Nothing worked. The more he tried, the more he seemed to be pushed away. It created a fundamental wound in his psyche, a desperate need for acknowledgement and validation that would define his actions for years to come. The Ninja Academy was supposed to be a fresh start. Finally, Naruto would be around other children his age, learning alongside them, proving himself through the same challenges they faced. Surely here, in a classroom where everyone started from the same place, he could make friends and earn respect. He was wrong. The children at the academy already knew to avoid Naruto. Their parents had taught them well, even if they didn't explain why. Naruto would try to sit next to other students, only to have them move away. He would try to join games during recess, only to be told they didn't need another player. He would try to be funny, to make people laugh, hoping that humor might be a bridge to connection, but his classmates just found him annoying. There were exceptions, small lights in the darkness. Shikamaru Nara, the lazy genius from a prestigious clan, seemed to see Naruto as a person rather than a pariah. He didn't exactly seek out Naruto's company, but he didn't avoid it either. And sometimes that passive acceptance was the kindest thing Naruto received all day. Choji Akemichi, Shikamaru's best friend, followed Shikamaru's lead in being at least cordial. But the one person Naruto desperately wanted to befriend, the one person whose acknowledgement he craved above all others, wanted nothing to do with him. Sasuke Uchiha was everything Naruto wasn't. Cool, skilled, respected, admired by everyone. Girls swooned over him. Boys wanted to be like him. Even the instructors praised his talents. Sasuke was the academy's star student, and he knew it. To Naruto, Sasuke represented everything he wanted to be. So naturally, Naruto declared Sasuke his rival, someone to compete against and eventually surpass. Sasuke found this proclamation deeply annoying. From his perspective, Naruto was the dead last student in their class, someone who could barely perform a basic clone technique, someone who had no business comparing himself to an Uchiha prodigy. The rivalry was almost entirely one-sided. Naruto would challenge Sasuke to contests that Sasuke would win effortlessly. Naruto would declare that next time would be different, that he was getting stronger, that soon he'd surpass Sasuke. Sasuke would respond with indifference or irritation, unable to understand why this failure wouldn't just give up and leave him alone. What neither of them understood at the time was that they were more similar than different. Both were orphans. Though Naruto didn't know about his parents and Sasuke's trauma from losing his family defined his entire existence, both were deeply lonely, though they expressed it differently. Both were desperate to prove themselves, to be acknowledged, to be seen as more than what others expected of them. They were two sides of the same coin, pushed apart by circumstances, but bound by shared pain. Iruka Umino was the one adult who broke through Naruto's isolation, though it took time. Iruka had lost his own parents during the Nine-Tails attack, killed when the beast rampaged through the village. When Iruka first saw Naruto's name on his class roster, he felt a surge of irrational hatred. This child contained the monster that had made him an orphan. How was he supposed to teach this boy, to care about him, to treat him fairly? But Iruka was a good man, and he recognized the ugliness of his own thoughts. He saw how the other villagers treated Naruto, how isolated and desperate for attention the boy was. He saw Naruto pulling increasingly dangerous pranks, not out of malice, but out of a fundamental need to be seen, even if it was through negative attention. And Iruka remembered what it felt like to be a child in pain with no one to help. Gradually, Iruka became Naruto's first real connection. He stayed after class to give Naruto extra help with techniques. He treated Naruto to ramen at Ichiraku, letting the boy eat his fill without judgment. Most importantly, he acknowledged Naruto's existence in a positive way, praising his improvements and believing in his potential. To Naruto, this kindness was water in a desert, and he treasured it beyond words. There was one student who noticed Naruto, who watched him with quiet admiration that she was too shy to ever express. Hinata Hyuga. She saw how Naruto never gave up, despite everyone putting him down. She saw how he would get back up after failing, how he would laugh off insults that would have crushed her spirit, how he fought for every small achievement with pure determination. She thought he was amazing, this boy who refused to let the world break him. But Hinata's crippling shyness and her own struggles with her clan's expectations meant she could never tell him how she felt. Naruto's pranks became legendary as he grew older and his skills improved. He vandalized the Hokage monument, painting silly faces on the carved likenesses of past leaders. He used transformation jutsu to impersonate instructors and cause chaos. He once released all the animals from the pet store, creating a stampede through the marketplace. Every time he was caught, he'd be punished. But the acknowledgement that came with notoriety was better than being invisible. But beneath the pranks and the goofy smile, beneath the proclamations that he'd become Hokage someday, was a deeply wounded child. At night, alone in his apartment, Naruto would sometimes look at the faces carved into the mountain and wonder what it felt like to be loved by an entire village. He would imagine having a family, having friends, having someone who cared whether he came home or not. He would dream of the day when people would stop looking at him with hatred and start seeing him as a person. The worst part, the part that Naruto never spoke aloud, was the doubt. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe there was something fundamentally wrong with him. Maybe he deserved to be alone. These thoughts would creep in during his darkest moments, undermining his confidence and making him question whether his dreams of becoming Hokage were just the delusions of a kid who couldn't face reality. But Naruto had something many others lacked, an absolutely unbreakable will. He made himself a promise, a vow that he would repeat like a mantra whenever the darkness threatened to overwhelm him. He would never give up. No matter how many times he failed, no matter how many people rejected him, no matter how impossible his dreams seemed, he would keep fighting. Because giving up would mean admitting that all those people who hated him were right, and Naruto couldn't accept that. As Naruto approached graduation from the academy, his isolation had shaped him in profound ways. He was starved for acknowledgement, willing to do almost anything to be recognized. He was competitive to a fault, seeing every interaction as a chance to prove himself. He was loud and abrasive, having learned that being noticed was better than being ignored. And underneath it all, he carried a deep well of loneliness and pain that he covered with smiles and determination. Naruto failed the graduation exam twice before finally passing. The test required students to successfully perform 3 basic techniques: the clone jutsu, the transformation jutsu, and the substitution jutsu. Naruto excelled at transformation and substitution, but the standard clone jutsu was his nemesis. The technique required precise chakra control to create an illusory copy of oneself, and Naruto, burdened with both his own enormous chakra reserves and the Ninetales influence, simply couldn't mold the small, precise amount needed. His second failure nearly broke him. Watching his classmates celebrate while he remained a failure was devastating. Mizuki, one of the academy instructors, found Naruto sitting alone in despair and manipulated the boy's pain. Mizuki told Naruto about a secret scroll hidden in the Hokage's residence that contained powerful, forbidden techniques. If Naruto could steal the scroll and learn a technique from it, Mizuki said, he would pass the graduation exam. Desperate to succeed, Naruto stole the Scroll of Seals, one of Konoha's most important and dangerous artifacts. He spent the night in the forest, learning the shadow clone technique, a forbidden jutsu that created real, physical copies of the user that could act independently and, when dispersed, transferred their memories and experiences back to the original. It was perfect for someone with Naruto's massive chakra reserves, requiring brute force rather than precision. The truth came out when Iruka found Naruto in the forest. Mizuki appeared, revealing his true intentions. He'd never meant to help Naruto pass. He'd manipulated the boy into committing treason so he could steal the scroll himself. And then Mizuki told Naruto the truth about the Ninetales sealed within him, the real reason everyone in the village hated him. For the first time in his life, Naruto understood. He wasn't hated for who he was, but for what he contained. The villagers saw him as the demon fox itself, unable or unwilling to separate the seal from what was sealed. Everything suddenly made horrible sense. The glares, the rejection, the violence. He was a living reminder of the worst day in Konoha's history. But Iruka stepped between Naruto and Mizuki, protecting his student despite his own past trauma. Iruka acknowledged Naruto's pain, validated his feelings, and then said something Naruto had never heard before. "I'm proud of you." Those simple words, that genuine expression of care, saved Naruto from despair. When Mizuki attacked, Naruto used his newly learned shadow clone technique to create hundreds of copies and overwhelm the traitor. Iruka gave Naruto his own forehead protector, the symbol that designated him as a full-fledged ninja of Konoha. It was a moment of pure validation, the first time someone had chosen to acknowledge Naruto, not despite the Ninetales, but as simply himself. Naruto cherished that forehead protector more than any possession he'd ever owned, wearing it proudly as proof that he belonged, that he was a real ninja, that someone believed in him. Graduating from the academy was just the beginning. Naruto was finally a genin, but he had years of training ahead of him before he could even dream of becoming Hokage. He would need to be assigned to a 3-man team under a jonin instructor. He would need to develop his skills, learn cooperation, and prove himself capable of handling real missions. More than anything, Naruto needed to show the village that he wasn't the Ninetales. He was Naruto Uzumaki, a ninja of Konoha, and someday he would be Hokage. That was his promise, his dream, his absolute vow. And Naruto Uzumaki never went back on his word. That was his ninja way. The day after graduation, all the newly minted genin gathered at the academy for team assignments. The air buzzed with excitement and nervousness as graduates waited to learn who they'd be working with for the foreseeable future. Friendships might be preserved or tested. Rivals might be forced to cooperate. Everything was about to change. Team assignments were carefully considered by the village leadership. The goal was to create balanced squads where members' strengths compensated for each other's weaknesses, where personality types would create functional dynamics, and where the Jonin instructor could guide the students most effectively. In practice, this meant a lot of political considerations, clan alliances, and strategic thinking went into every three-person team. Naruto sat impatiently through the announcements. Team 8 was assigned to Kurenai Yuhi, Hinata Hyuga, Kiba Inuzuka, and Shino Aburame, a tracking-focused team heavy on sensory abilities. Team 10 went to Asuma Sarutobi, son of the third Hokage, Shikamaru Nara, Choji Akimichi, and Ino Yamanaka, the newest generation of the legendary Ino Shikacho formation. Then came Team 7. When Iruka read the names, Naruto's heart sank, even as Sakura's soared. Team 7 would consist of Naruto Uzumaki, Sasuke Uchiha, and Sakura Haruno, under the leadership of Kakashi Hatake. From Naruto's perspective, this was terrible. He'd been paired with his rival Sasuke, the person who looked down on him more than anyone else their age. And Sakura, the girl Naruto had a massive crush on, was completely obsessed with Sasuke, seeing Naruto as nothing more than an annoying pest who got in the way of her one true love. How was this supposed to work? From Sasuke's perspective, this was equally bad. He'd been paired with the dead last student in their class, someone who would obviously drag down the team's performance. And Sakura, while skilled in theory, seemed more interested in flirting with him than actually training. Neither teammate seemed like they would help him achieve his goal of becoming strong enough to kill his brother Itachi. From Sakura's perspective, this was a dream come true in one way and a nightmare in another. She was on the same team as Sasuke, giving her countless opportunities to be near him, to prove herself worthy of his attention. But she was also stuck with Naruto, who she found loud, crude, and utterly unimpressive. The boy had actually had the audacity to ask her out, as if someone like him could ever measure up to someone like Sasuke. The three sat together in tense silence, waiting for their Jonin instructor to arrive. All the other teams had already left with their teachers, but Kakashi was nowhere to be seen. An hour passed, then two. Naruto's impatience grew into frustration, which evolved into indignation. Their teacher was incredibly late. This was no way to make a first impression. When Kakashi finally appeared, materializing casually in the doorway over 3 hours late, Naruto's irritation exploded. The man had spiky silver hair, a mask covering the lower half of his face, and his forehead protector tilted to cover his left eye. He held a small orange book in one hand and radiated an aura of complete unconcern for his tardiness. "My first impression of you, you're all idiots," Kakashi said, after having his students introduce themselves. The bluntness was shocking, but it captured the fundamental problem with Team 7. These three had no cohesion, no mutual trust, no understanding of what it meant to work together as a unit. Kakashi told them to meet him at Training Ground 3 the next morning at 5 a.m. for their real test. What he didn't tell them was that the graduation from the academy meant nothing. The real test, the one that would determine whether they became proper genin or were sent back to the academy, was still to come. And historically, Kakashi failed every team assigned to him. The next morning arrived with Naruto oversleeping, Sasuke arriving early, and Sakura somewhere in between. Kakashi showed up at noon, 7 hours late, with another lazy excuse about getting lost on the road of life. By this point, Naruto was furious, Sasuke was annoyed, and Sakura was confused about what kind of teacher behaved this way. Kakashi produced 2 bells attached to his belt. "Your task is to take these bells from me before the alarm goes off at 3 p.m. Those who don't get a bell don't get lunch." He gestured to 3 posts nearby. "They'll be tied to those posts and will watch the others eat." The implication was clear but unstated. There were only 2 bells, meaning one team member would fail. This was the true test. Not a test of combat ability, though that mattered. Not a test of individual skill, though that helped. It was a test of teamwork, of whether these 3 self-centered children could set aside their egos and work together toward a common goal. They failed spectacularly. Naruto charged at Kakashi head-on, attempting to overpower him through sheer numbers and determination. Kakashi effortlessly defeated him, at one point literally sticking him in the dirt upside down, with only his legs visible, stuck there like a turnip. Sasuke tried to use his superior skills to fight Kakashi alone, employing techniques and strategies learned at the academy. Kakashi used the Sharingan hidden under his forehead protector to predict and counter every move, eventually trapping Sasuke in a genjutsu that made him believe he'd been killed. Sakura, paralyzed by concern for Sasuke after seeing him seemingly dead, was defeated without much of a fight. The alarm rang. Time was up. None of them had gotten a bell. Kakashi tied Naruto to one of the posts as promised, declaring him the one who would go without food. Then he told Sasuke and Sakura they could eat, but if they shared any food with Naruto, all 3 would fail immediately. Kakashi disappeared, leaving the 3 genin alone. Naruto's stomach growled audibly. Sakura and Sasuke unpacked their lunches, the smell of food torture for Naruto, who'd skipped breakfast on Kakashi's advice to avoid vomiting during the test. Then something unexpected happened. Sasuke offered Naruto some of his food. When Sakura asked what he was doing, Sasuke's logic was simple. If he's too weak from hunger, the team's performance will suffer. We need him at full strength to have any chance. Sakura, touched by Sasuke's practical concern, even if it wasn't exactly compassionate, offered Naruto some of her food as well. They were defying their instructor's direct order, risking failure. But they'd reasoned that working as a team was more important than following rules that seemed designed to divide them. Kakashi appeared in a dramatic flash of smoke, ready to fail them for their disobedience. The 3 genin braced themselves for the lecture, for being sent back to the academy, for the shame of failure. Instead, Kakashi smiled beneath his mask. You pass. The confusion on their faces was almost comical. Kakashi explained the true purpose of the test. In the ninja world, those who break the rules are scum, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than scum. Every successful team he'd ever been on had understood that teamwork and loyalty to one's comrades superseded everything else. Individual strength meant nothing if you couldn't work with others. The 2 bells were a lie, a trick to make them compete against each other. The real test was whether they would see through the deception and choose cooperation over competition. By deciding to feed Naruto despite the risk, they'd proven they understood, even if only instinctively, that the team's success was more important than individual glory. Team 7 had passed, but their troubles were far from over. Passing Kakashi's test made them official genin, but it didn't make them a functional team. The underlying tensions remained. Naruto still saw Sasuke as a rival to surpass. Sasuke still saw Naruto as a nuisance and Sakura as a distraction. Sakura still valued Sasuke's approval over everything else, including her own growth as a ninja. Their first assignments reflected their status as absolute beginners. D-rank missions, the lowest tier, were given to fresh genin to teach them the basics of following orders, working together, and earning their pay. These missions included weeding gardens, painting fences, finding lost pets, babysitting, and helping with grocery shopping. The work was tedious, unglamorous, and beneath what any of them thought they deserved. Naruto complained constantly about the boring missions. He'd become a ninja to do exciting things, to prove himself, to fight villains and save people. Instead, he was chasing after a cat that didn't want to be caught, a cat that belonged to the fire daimyo's wife and scratched him bloody for his trouble. Where was the glory in this? But Kakashi understood the purpose of D-rank missions better than his students. These tasks taught fundamentals, following a client's instructions exactly, even when they seemed pointless, completing objectives as a team when members had different approaches, building trust through shared experiences, even boring ones, learning that not every problem was solved with violence. These were lessons every ninja needed to internalize. During this period, the team's dynamics slowly began to shift. Naruto's determination, his refusal to give up no matter how tedious the task, started to earn Sasuke's grudging respect. Maybe the dead last wasn't completely useless. Sakura began to notice that Naruto's cheerfulness, while annoying, actually helped the team's morale during long, boring missions. And all three were developing a shared history of experiences, inside jokes, and mutual understanding that comes from spending time together. Kakashi observed his students carefully during these missions. He saw Naruto's incredible endurance and his tendency to inspire others through sheer enthusiasm. He saw Sasuke's analytical mind and his drive to prove himself, likely stemming from trauma Kakashi himself understood all too well. He saw Sakura's sharp intellect and her potential if she could move past her obsession with Sasuke and focus on her own growth. But Kakashi also saw the cracks, the fundamental problems that could tear this team apart if not addressed. Naruto's need for acknowledgement made him reckless, and attention-seeking Sasuke's obsession with power and revenge was creating tunnel vision where nothing else mattered. Sakura's dependence on others' approval prevented her from discovering her own strength. These issues wouldn't be resolved quickly or easily. After several weeks of D-rank missions, Naruto's frustration reached a boiling point. During one mission briefing in the Hokage's office, Naruto interrupted Hiruzen's explanation of another D-rank task by shouting that they deserved something more challenging. The outburst was disrespectful and unprofessional, but it was also honest. Naruto was tired of being treated like he couldn't handle real ninja work. Hiruzen, showing either wisdom or perhaps a touch of indulgent fondness for the boy he'd watched grow up, decided to grant Naruto's request. He assigned Team 7 a C-rank mission, escort a bridge builder named Tazuna back to his home in the Land of Waves and protect him while he completed construction of a major bridge connecting his island nation to the mainland. C-rank missions were rated for encounters with bandits or wild animals, but nothing beyond what Genin and a Jonin could handle. It should have been straightforward. Travel to the Land of Waves, guard the client while he worked, return home. A perfect stepping stone between boring D ranks and truly dangerous work. As Team 7 accepted the mission, none of them understood that their client was hiding something. None of them knew that what they thought would be a simple escort mission would become a life and death struggle that would define their team and set the course for everything that followed. They were about to face their first real enemies. They were about to learn what it truly meant to be a ninja, and they were about to discover that the world beyond Konoha's walls was far more complex, dangerous, and morally ambiguous than they'd ever imagined. The gates of Konoha closed behind Team 7 as they set out with Tazuna, the bridge builder they'd been hired to protect. The old man was gruff and smelled of alcohol, complaining about being assigned a bunch of brats as protection. Naruto took immediate offense, resulting in a brief shouting match that Kakashi had to defuse. Sasuke remained aloof, focused on scanning their surroundings. Sakura tried to maintain professional composure while internally cringing at Naruto's behavior. The journey to the Land of Waves would take several days on foot, traveling through forests and along roads that saw regular merchant traffic. It should have been uneventful. C-rank missions rarely encountered significant danger, especially not with a Jonin like Kakashi leading the team. The first sign that something was wrong came subtly. They passed a puddle on the road despite it not having rained in weeks, and the day being sunny. Kakashi noticed, but gave no outward indication. His visible eye curved in its characteristic smile as he read his orange book. The genin noticed nothing. Two ninja emerged from the puddle, which had been a water-based transformation technique. They were the demon brothers, Meizu and Gozu, Chunin from Kirigakure. Their weapon was a shuriken chain that connected them, covered in poison. Before anyone could react, they'd wrapped the chain around Kakashi and pulled, shredding their target into pieces. Naruto froze, paralyzed by shock. His teacher had just been killed right in front of him. The demon brothers turned their attention to Tazuna, the real target, with Naruto standing directly in their path. One brother lunged, his poisoned gauntlet aimed to tear through the boy's stomach. Sasuke moved. He'd overcome his own shock faster than Naruto, his Uchiha training kicking in. Sasuke intercepted the attack, using a kunai to pin the chain to a tree before delivering a kick that sent one brother flying. The second brother went for Tazuna directly, only to be stopped by Sakura, who'd positioned herself in front of the client, kunai drawn despite her trembling hands. Kakashi appeared behind the demon brothers, very much alive, and knocked both unconscious with precise strikes. It had been a test, of course. Kakashi had substituted himself with a log the moment before the chain attack, a basic technique called the substitution jutsu. He'd wanted to see how his students would respond to a real threat. Sasuke had done well, overcoming fear to protect the team. Sakura had done well, protecting the client despite her terror. But Naruto had frozen, letting fear paralyze him when action was needed. The shame of that failure burned in Naruto's heart as Kakashi interrogated the captured ninja. The truth came out quickly under Kakashi's interrogation. These weren't random bandits. They were shinobi hired specifically to kill Tazuna. This wasn't a C-rank mission anymore. The presence of ninja enemies meant this was at minimum B rank, possibly A rank depending on who had hired them and what other forces might be waiting. Tazuna confessed. His nation, the Land of Waves, was under the control of a shipping magnate named Gato. This corrupt businessman had established a monopoly on all sea-based transport to and from the island nation, strangling the economy and essentially holding the entire country hostage. Tazuna's bridge would break that monopoly, allowing goods and people to move freely again. Gato wanted Tazuna dead before the bridge could be completed. The bridge builder explained he couldn't afford to hire ninja at the true mission rank. His nation was poor, nearly bankrupt from Gato's stranglehold on trade. A C rank was all he could afford, so he'd lied about the dangers, hoping the ninja would be committed enough to see the mission through once they learned the truth. Kakashi had every right to abort the mission. Tazuna had violated the contract by misrepresenting the mission's difficulty. They could return to Konoha without any dishonor, bill Tazuna for the escort to this point, and leave him to his fate. That was the professional response, the by-the-book decision. But Kakashi looked at his students' faces. He saw Naruto's shame over freezing during the fight. He saw Sasuke's barely concealed excitement at the prospect of real combat. He saw Sakura's concern for Tazuna, despite the old man having lied to them. And Kakashi made a decision that any sensible jonin would have questioned. They would continue the mission. His reasoning had layers. Professionally, abandoning a client in the field set a bad precedent. Personally, he saw this as a teaching opportunity his students needed. They would learn what it meant to be ninja, what it meant to face real danger, what the world was actually like beyond Konoha's protective walls. And perhaps, buried beneath practical concerns, Kakashi knew what it felt like to fail to protect something precious. He wouldn't let Tazuna's dream die without at least trying to help. They continued toward the land of waves, crossing into the island nation by boat, since the bridge wasn't completed yet. The mist grew thick as they approached, visibility dropping to nearly nothing. The boatman, a friend of Tazuna's, navigated by memory and experience, his boat cutting silently through fog so dense it seemed almost solid. When they reached land and began the journey to Tazuna's home, Naruto, still ashamed of his earlier paralysis, became hypervigilant. Every sound made him jump, every shadow could be an enemy. When he thought he saw something move in the bushes, Naruto threw a kunai without thinking. A white rabbit, terrified and innocent, bounded out, Naruto's blade having missed by inches. Sasuke mocked Naruto for nearly killing a harmless animal. Kakashi noted the rabbit's white fur, unusual for this season, suggesting it was a domesticated rabbit that had escaped or been released. Before he could ponder this observation further, his instinct screamed danger. "Get down!" Team 7 and Tazuna hit the ground as something massive whistled through the air where their heads had been. A sword, enormous beyond any practical weapon's size, embedded itself in a nearby tree trunk. The blade had to be as tall as a person and nearly as wide, its weight requiring tremendous strength to wield. A man stood on the sword's handle, facing them with an expression of mild interest. His lower face was wrapped in bandages, and he wore the outfit of a Kirigakure Jonin Zabuza Mamochi, the demon of the hidden mist, one of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist, looked down at Team 7 like a predator assessing prey. "Well, if it isn't Kakashi of the Sharingan," Zabuza said, his voice carrying clear threat despite its casual tone. "Sorry, but the old man is mine. Hand him over." Kakashi pushed up his forehead protector, revealing his left eye, the Sharingan, a red eye with 3 tomo swirling around the pupil. This was no regular eye, but one that had been transplanted into Kakashi during a previous battle, a gift from a dying friend. The Sharingan could predict movement, copy techniques, and see through illusions. It made Kakashi one of the most dangerous ninja in Konoha, despite not being born an Uchiha. Zabuza was impressed, but not intimidated. He vanished in a swirl of mist, reappearing on a nearby lake's surface, standing on the water through chakra control. Thick fog rolled out from his position, reducing visibility to nearly 0. This was the hidden mist technique, Zabuza's specialty, a jutsu that created a fog so dense that even the Sharingan couldn't see through it properly. "Manji formation," Kakashi ordered, and his students instantly moved into position around Tazuna. A defensive formation designed to protect a client from all angles. Kakashi prepared for battle, knowing he was facing a legitimate Jonin-level threat who might actually be able to kill him. Zabuza's voice echoed from the mist, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere. He listed vital points on the human body: the larynx, the spine, the lungs, the liver, the jugular, the collarbone, the kidneys, the heart. 8 vital points. Which one would he strike? The psychological warfare was working. Sakura was shaking, her hands barely able to grip her kunai. Kakashi released his own killing intent, a wave of murderous chakra so intense that Sasuke briefly considered suicide rather than face it. The message was clear. Kakashi was also capable of killing them all, but he would protect them instead. Sasuke calmed slightly, though his hands still trembled. Zabuza appeared behind them, already swinging his massive blade toward Tazuna. Kakashi intercepted, blocking the blow with a kunai despite the size difference. They exchanged attacks, Kakashi using water techniques to match Zabuza's water techniques, both ninja demonstrating mastery of their element. The battle's tide shifted when Kakashi got caught. Zabuza created a water prison technique, trapping Kakashi inside a sphere of water that he had to maintain physical contact with to keep active. Kakashi was stuck, unable to move without drowning, while Zabuza created a water clone to deal with the genin. The water clone toyed with Team 7, demonstrating the vast gap between genin and jonin level. It kicked Naruto into the water, punched Sasuke hard enough to send him flying, and mocked their attempts to fight back. They were children playing at being warriors, and Zabuza's clone was showing them the truth of their inadequacy. But Naruto, humiliated and desperate, began to form a plan. He noticed Zabuza had to maintain contact with the water prison to keep Kakashi trapped. If they could force him to release it, Kakashi could fight at full strength. Naruto whispered the plan to Sasuke, who understood immediately, despite their mutual antagonism. Naruto charged at Zabuza directly, throwing a massive Fuma Shuriken, a large windmill-shaped blade. Zabuza easily deflected it, mocking Naruto's aim, but a second Shuriken had been hidden in the shadow of the first, a technique Sasuke had executed perfectly. Zabuza had to jump to avoid it, and when he did, the second Shuriken transformed. It was Naruto, having used the transformation technique to disguise himself as a weapon. Mid-air, Naruto threw a kunai at the real Zabuza, who couldn't dodge, while maintaining the water prison. Zabuza was forced to release Kakashi to avoid the attack. With Kakashi freed, the battle's dynamics reversed instantly. Kakashi's Sharingan tracked every movement Zabuza made, and more than that, it began copying Zabuza's techniques. Every water jutsu Zabuza performed, Kakashi replicated perfectly, sometimes even executing it faster than the original. Zabuza was fighting a mirror of his own abilities, and the psychological impact was devastating. The fight culminated with both ninja preparing massive water dragon techniques. Zabuza formed hand seals at incredible speed, molding his chakra into the shape of a serpentine dragon made of water. Kakashi copied every seal perfectly, matching the technique exactly. The two water dragons collided, creating a massive water spout that drenched the area. Kakashi emerged victorious, catching Zabuza against a tree with kunai, pinning his limbs. As Kakashi prepared to finish the fight, a needle struck Zabuza's neck. The attacker was a boy wearing a Hunter Nin mask, appearing to be from Kirigakure's tracking division. Hunter Nin were responsible for hunting down rogue ninja and disposing of their bodies to protect village secrets. The masked ninja thanked Kakashi for his assistance in dealing with a wanted criminal and left with Zabuza's body, disappearing into the mist. Team 7 was exhausted but alive, the mission seemingly complete with their main threat eliminated. Except Kakashi wasn't convinced. Something bothered him about the encounter. Hunter Nin typically disposed of bodies on site to prevent sensitive information from being stolen. This one had taken the body elsewhere, and the weapon used to kill Zabuza, a senbon needle, was typically used for disabling rather than killing. The placement suggested not a killing blow, but a technique to induce a death-like state. His suspicions were confirmed when they reached Tazuna's home and Kakashi collapsed from chakra exhaustion. The Sharingan, not being his natural eye, consumed enormous amounts of chakra to use. While he recovered over the next week, Kakashi explained his theory. Zabuza was still alive, rescued by the masked ninja, who was likely an ally. They would return to finish the job, and next time, Zabuza would be prepared for the Sharingan. Team 7 needed to become stronger, and quickly. Kakashi took them to the forest for training, teaching them tree walking, an exercise that required channeling chakra to one's feet with enough precision to stick to vertical surfaces. Mastering this would improve their chakra control immensely and prepare them for more advanced techniques. Both Naruto and Sasuke struggled with the exercise, though for different reasons. Sasuke had natural talent, but lacked stamina. Naruto had enormous chakra reserves, but terrible control. They competed against each other, each determined to master the technique first, their rivalry pushing them both to improve faster than they would have alone. Meanwhile, at Tazuna's house, they met his family, his daughter Tsunami and his grandson Inari. The boy, around 8 years old, was sullen and defeated, believing that fighting against Gato was pointless. Heroes didn't exist, he insisted. Anyone who stood up against Gato would be killed, just like his stepfather had been. Kaiser, Inari's stepfather, had been a fisherman who stood up to Gato's thugs when they terrorized the town. For a brief time, he'd been a symbol of hope for the land of waves. Someone willing to fight back Gato had made an example of him, executing Kaiser publicly in front of the entire town, including Inari. The trauma had broken something in the boy, convincing him that hope was dangerous and heroes were fools. Naruto, who'd never had parents and couldn't understand Inari's depression over losing a father figure, responded with anger. He called Inari a coward, saying that whining accomplished nothing. If Inari had a problem, he should do something about it instead of crying. The harsh words were typical of Naruto's blunt approach to life, but they hurt Inari deeply. Yet beneath Naruto's harsh words was a truth the boy himself didn't fully recognize. Naruto understood pain and loss in his own way. He'd grown up alone, hated by an entire village, with no one to comfort him or tell him things would be okay. If anyone had a right to give up and wallow in misery, it was Naruto. But he hadn't. He'd kept fighting, kept dreaming, kept believing things could get better. That resilience, born from suffering, was what drove his words to Inari. A week later, Kakashi judged his students ready. They would escort Tazuna to the bridge, where work had continued despite the danger. The bridge was nearly complete, a massive structure spanning the strait between the island and mainland, representing hope for an entire nation's economic freedom. They arrived to find Tazuna's workers lying unconscious, victims of a non-lethal attack meant to clear the area. Mist rolled in, thick and unnatural, carrying with it the sense of malevolent intent. Zabuza emerged from the fog, completely recovered, with the masked ninja at his side. The masked ninja was revealed to be Haku, a boy around the same age as Team 7, but already a highly skilled and dangerous combatant. Haku engaged Sasuke, while Zabuza fought Kakashi again, splitting the battles to prevent Kakashi from interfering with his partner's fight. Haku's technique was a Kekkei Genkai called Ice Release, the ability to create and manipulate ice, a combination of water and wind natures that created something entirely new. He formed a dome of ice mirrors around Sasuke, trapping him inside what he called demonic ice mirrors. From each mirror, Haku could emerge partially, throwing senbon needles from every angle at speeds too fast to track. Sasuke was being shredded. The senbon struck vital points, causing pain and limited damage without being immediately lethal. Haku was deliberately avoiding killing blows, honoring his partner while still trying to protect Zabuza. But the accumulation of injuries was devastating. Sasuke couldn't escape, couldn't defend, couldn't counter. He was losing. Naruto, who'd been left behind to rest, arrived at the bridge and immediately assessed the situation. Kakashi was handling Zabuza, or at least keeping him busy. Sakura was protecting Tazuna, but Sasuke needed help desperately. Without hesitation, Naruto charged at Haku's ice dome. Sasuke tried to warn Naruto to stay back, but Naruto, in a characteristically impulsive move, entered the ice mirror prison to help his teammate. Now both were trapped, and Haku's technique became even more effective with 2 targets to attack simultaneously. But something unexpected happened through their shared struggle. Naruto and Sasuke began working together, truly cooperating for the first time since their team was formed. They predicted each other's movements, covered each other's openings, and found a rhythm in their teamwork. The rivalry that had defined their relationship transformed, just briefly, into partnership. Sasuke's eyes began to change. The stress of battle, the need to protect his teammate, the desperation of their situation triggered something in his Uchiha blood. His eyes turned red, a single tomoe appearing in each. Sasuke had awakened his Sharingan, joining the ranks of his clan's legendary warriors. With his new Dojutsu active, Sasuke could begin to track Haku's movements between mirrors. It wasn't perfect, his newly awakened eyes lacking the refinement of a fully developed Sharingan, but it was enough to see the attacks coming. For a moment, victory seemed possible. Haku recognized the Sharingan, understanding the threat it posed. He would have to end this quickly, which meant abandoning his restraint. Haku prepared a volley of Senbon aimed at vital points on both boys, a killing attack meant to end the battle definitively. Naruto, lacking Sasuke's enhanced vision, couldn't see the attack coming. He was vulnerable, exposed, about to be killed. And in that moment, Sasuke made a choice that would echo through both their lives. He moved in front of Naruto, taking the Senbon meant for his teammate. Multiple needles pierced Sasuke's body, and he fell, seemingly dead. Something broke in Naruto. This boy who'd been his rival, who'd looked down on him, who'd seemed to have everything Naruto wanted, had just died protecting him. The injustice of it, the pain of watching someone die for him, the rage at his own weakness. It was too much. Naruto's chakra began to change, turning red and violent. The Nine Tails' influence emerged for the first time in battle. Naruto's eyes turned red, his nails became claws, and a visible shroud of the Nine Tails chakra surrounded him. He moved with speed and power beyond anything he demonstrated before. His attacks carrying the Fox Demon's malice, Haku's ice mirrors shattered under the assault. For the first time in the battle, Haku was on the defensive, struggling against this transformed opponent. But even with the Nine Tails' power coursing through him, Naruto couldn't finish Haku. The boy was too skilled, too fast, and even weakened by Naruto's assault. He managed to position himself at a critical moment. Kakashi had nearly defeated Zabuza, preparing a lightning blade technique that would pierce straight through his opponent's heart. Haku moved between Zabuza and Kakashi's attack, taking the lightning blade through his own chest instead. He died instantly, but his death saved Zabuza, giving his master one more chance to fight. Haku's final words expressed no regret, only gratitude that he could be useful to the person who had given his life meaning. Zabuza was stunned by Haku's sacrifice, struggling to understand why the boy would throw his life away. Before he could process it, Gato arrived with an army of thugs. Revealing his betrayal, Gato had never intended to pay Zabuza. He'd hired the ninja specifically because he was a missing nin who could be killed without consequence. Gato even mocked Haku's death, kicking the boy's body disrespectfully. Naruto, his rage still burning, but now mixed with grief, shouted at Zabuza. He told the hardened ninja that Haku hadn't been just a tool, that he'd cared about Zabuza deeply, that he died happy because he could protect someone precious. Naruto's words, raw and emotional, cut through Zabuza's defenses. Tears rolled down Zabuza's bandaged face as he finally understood what he'd lost. This boy who'd followed him loyally, who'd obeyed every order without question, who'd learned to suppress his gentle nature to become a killing tool. Haku had been more than a weapon. He'd been human, someone who deserved better than Zabuza had given him. Zabuza asked Naruto for a kunai. With his arms destroyed by Kakashi's attacks, the rogue ninja could no longer form seals or wield his sword, but he could still fight. Taking the kunai in his teeth, Zabuza charged into Gato's army, a demon of the mist, even in his dying moments. He carved through thugs with kunai and fury, reaching Gato and killing him before his body finally gave out. As snow began to fall, Zabuza asked Kakashi to take him to Haku's body. Kakashi complied, carrying the dying ninja to where his partner lay. Zabuza wanted to see Haku's face one more time, to die beside the person who'd meant more to him than he'd realized while they were alive. As his consciousness faded, Zabuza wondered if they could be together in the next life, though he doubted someone like him deserved such peace. The battle was over. Sasuke was unconscious but alive. The Senbon had struck pressure points rather than vital organs, inducing a death-like state. Gato's thugs, seeing their boss dead and facing angry villagers who'd finally found courage, fled the land of waves. The bridge would be completed without further interference. Team 7 buried Zabuza and Haku side by side, overlooking the sea. Kakashi left Zabuza's massive sword as a grave marker, a symbol of respect for a fallen warrior. The experience had changed all of them fundamentally. They'd learned that enemies could be human, complex individuals with their own dreams and pain. They'd learned that the world wasn't divided into heroes and villains, but into people making difficult choices in impossible situations. As they prepared to return to Konoha, Tazuna announced that the bridge would be named the Great Naruto Bridge, in honor of the ninja who'd shown his grandson that heroes did exist, that standing up against oppression was possible, that one person's determination could inspire an entire nation. Naruto, who'd spent his entire life seeking acknowledgement, was overwhelmed. A bridge, a massive monument that would stand for generations, would carry his name. People he'd never met would know that Naruto Uzumaki had been here, had fought, had mattered. It was more recognition than he'd ever dreamed of receiving. The journey back to Konoha was quiet, contemplative. They'd left the village as children playing at being ninja. They returned as genin who'd faced death, witnessed sacrifice, and understood that the real world was far more complicated than anything they'd learned in the academy. The Land of Waves mission had forged them into a true team, bound by shared trauma and mutual respect earned through battle. This was just the beginning. Greater challenges awaited them in Konoha and beyond. Rivalries would intensify, friendships would be tested. Dark forces were moving in the shadows, threats that made Zabuza and Haku seem like minor players. But Team 7 had proven they could face the darkness and survive. They had each other now, and that bond, however imperfect, would carry them through the trials ahead. The story of Naruto Uzumaki, the boy with the demons sealed inside him, was truly beginning. From rejected orphan to acknowledged hero, from failure to ninja, from isolation to teamwork, he was walking the path that would eventually lead him to his destiny. He would face enemies more powerful than he could imagine. He would make friends who would stand beside him no matter what. He would discover the truth about his parents, about the Nine Tails, about the cycle of hatred that had plagued the shinobi world for generations. And someday, the boy who everyone had hated would become the man everyone respected. The child who was told he'd never amount to anything would become the ninja who saved the world. The Jinchuriki, who was feared and despised, would become the Hokage who united the nations in peace. But all of that starts here, with Team 7's first real mission, with the lessons learned in the Land of Waves, with the understanding that being a ninja meant more than just fighting. It meant protecting what was precious, understanding those who opposed you, and never giving up on your dreams no matter how impossible they seemed. This is Naruto's story. This is where legends begin. Thank you all so much for joining me on this journey through the origins of Naruto and the formation of Team 7. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the mythology, the history, and the characters that make this world so compelling, please hit that like button and subscribe to the Lore Loft for more explorations of your favorite anime and games. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep fighting, and never give up, because that's your ninja way.